You're listening to A Slice of Therapy with me, Alun Parry. Now let's suppose that you're back at school, or maybe even university, and you decide to join the debating team. And so when you go to the debating team, what they'll typically do is that they will have a motion. And it'll say, this house believes something or other. I don't know, this house believes that the earth is flat, or this house believes that driverless cars are the future. Whatever it happens to be, they'll have a motion. This house believes something or other. And then what will happen randomly is that you would be assigned a position either in favour of that or against it. Now, the interesting thing about a school debating team or a university debating team is that it doesn't matter what your own personal opinion is. The motion will come forward, and at random, you will be given a position for or against to argue. Now, it might be that it says this house believes that the earth is flat. And you might think that's a preposterous idea, and yet you have to speak for the motion. Or it might say that driverless cars are the future, and you think absolutely they are. And yet you might be given the task of speaking against the motion. And then what you'd have to do is actually come up with a really resounding argument against the belief that you personally hold, and do it so well that your side wins. Because when you're in a debating team, that's how you win. You win by making really good arguments and citing evidence on behalf of those arguments and speaking convincingly for that particular cause. But it might not be the cause that you actually believe in. You might actually have a completely different belief to the one that you're speaking. Now, I mention this because in life we have beliefs about all sorts of things, don't we? But crucially, we have beliefs about ourselves as well. And sometimes those beliefs are harsh, and sometimes they're helpful. By the same token, we have beliefs about others, and we have beliefs about life itself, whether life is hard, whether life is easy. So there's three things that kind of form our worldview: our belief about ourselves, our belief about other people, and our belief about life itself. Now, like I say, some of these beliefs are really helpful. I might hold beliefs about myself that really push me forward, really help me through difficult situations. And yet at the same time, I also hold beliefs that get in my way. There's certain beliefs that we all have that stop us moving forward, that limit us. Now, what would happen if on that debating team we had to take the opposite side to one of those unhelpful beliefs? Let's say, for example, that I have a belief that I'm terrible in job interviews. And let's say I've held that position all my life pretty much. If I was on the debating team, I might have to speak against that motion. I might have to argue that down. And if I argued it down, not only would I have to make a really strong watertight case against it, but I'd have to go and hunt the evidence as well. In fact, if I was about to write that speech in 7 days' time, my radar would be completely on for evidence to the contrary. I would be seeking evidence all the time of how great I was in job interviews or in any kind of interviews that could be applied across. I would have to be speaking to the motion that I am great at job interviews. Now, that's just an example, of course. And so I'm curious, what are the beliefs that you hold about yourself that most get in your way? It might be, I don't have a right to give my opinion. I don't have a right to impose my preferences. I shouldn't be important. Or whatever it happens to be. So imagine if you took the role of the school debater, and imagine if you were given the task of arguing that unhelpful belief down. If you were given the task to not just make the case against it, but to really hunt for evidence that that unhelpful belief simply isn't the case. And so that's my invite to you, really, to take on the mantle of the member of the school debating team and to be given the task of having to argue against an unhelpful belief that you might have had all your life but is really getting in your way. Maybe it's something about you. Maybe it's something about others. Maybe it's a belief that you hold about life itself. But whatever it is, I'm inviting you to join the school debating team. And I'm giving you the task to argue against that unhelpful belief. Now, if you were arguing against that unhelpful belief, you would do three things. The first thing that you would do is you would gather evidence. You would gather evidence that this thing simply wasn't true. And so you would switch on your radar for signs of the opposite being the case. The second thing that you would do is you would discount evidence that it was true. So that any moment that you notice something which might suggest that this belief, this unhelpful belief, is actually fact, any piece of evidence that you find of that, you would find a way to discount it. You would find a way to explain it away so it lacked any importance. Because after all, that's what you do in a debating team. You notice what your opposition might say in support of that belief, and you will argue it down, you will minimise it, you will put a case for why that doesn't really hold any strength or weight. So the first thing is you'd look for evidence of the opposite being true. The second is you would discount any evidence to the contrary. And then the third thing that you would do is you would put that case with a fervent passion. And so that's my invite to you, to do those three things, to look for the evidence, look for the times that demonstrate that that belief isn't true. Secondly, find any moments or instances that crop up for you that seem to suggest that the belief might well be true and argue it down, just as you would in a debating team. And finally, put that case to yourself fervently. Because when you do that, especially if you do this over a period of time, like a project, you will start to get to a place where the old belief starts to crumble. And the old belief will start to crumble for two big reasons. The first one is because you can see those things that you cling to, which confirm the old belief, you will have minimised, you'll have discounted, you will have battered that down with alternative arguments. But secondly, in the hunt for evidence that it isn't true, you genuinely will find a lot of exceptions. I'm not a runner, I might tell myself, and yet I've run a half marathon, and I've run a 10k, and I've run a 5k. And so odd then that I might tell myself that I'm just not a runner. But when I enter the school debating team, I find those exceptions, because that's what looking for evidence does. It finds exceptions to that belief. And so by discounting and taking the weight out of those things that support the belief, and then finding the exceptions which discredit the belief, we start to hold it a lot lighter. And in fact, by the end of the debate, you realise that this position that you've held all your life, this belief that you've had about yourself that gets in the way, was actually a lot easier to knock down than you ever thought. So to recap then, we looked at how in school debating teams, there'll be emotion. And no matter what your belief is, you can find yourself either for or against the motion. You can actually find yourself arguing against a firmly held belief. And we saw too how we have firmly held beliefs about ourselves and others and life itself that can either be helpful or can get in the way. And so when we notice something that gets in the way, we too can join the school debating team. And we can argue the case against our own belief by finding exceptions, by finding discounts to those things that support it, and by making the case strongly in such a way that any audience listening would be convinced by it. And we saw that when we do that, the very act of going through that process makes that old belief a lot more shaky, helps us to hold that old belief a lot more loosely, and hopefully even allows us to change that belief into the one that we've argued so well in favour of. So thanks for listening. If you found it useful, please pass it on. If you'd like to work with me directly, I'm Alun Parry. You can find out more at liverpoolpsychotherapy.co.uk. And please subscribe to the podcast too, because it's completely free and you'll never miss an episode again. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another one.